Yo, what is good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and I have a huge trade to break down in my Dynasty League. Whenever we make a big trade in Dynasty, I like to go over it in a video for you guys, just so you can see how a real-life Dynasty trade goes down. And there were a lot of components of this trade. There were 3 teams involved. Really, it was 3 separate trades that went down, but we all kind of, figured things out with each other on what would be best for everybody. So we're going to get right into it. And the main piece of this trade right here, at least from my perspective for my team, is buying low on Kyle Pitts, tight end of the Atlanta Falcons. This guy is a generational talent at tight end. Last season, his rookie year, he had over 1,000 receiving yards, but only 1 touchdown. And he is still currently only 21 years old. Now, well, first of all, before we take a look at this season, last year, you can see here are his fantasy finishes in half PPR. He had some good games, showed off some big playability, but he had 1,026 yards on 68 catches, but only 1 touchdown. So he showed that, as a rookie, which tight ends normally don't produce numbers as a rookie, but to get over 1,000 yards as a rookie, even with only 1 touchdown, shows that he does have that elite upside. Now, this season, 2022, he has started this season off tremendously poor. No more Matt Ryan at quarterback. They have Marcus Mariota there. He went 2 for 19 in each of the first 2 games. And people are panicking, especially in redraft. I would not trade for Kyle Pitts in redraft because while I do think there will be brighter days ahead this season, I do worry that in this offense with Marcus Mariota, I don't know what Kyle Pitts' ceiling is. They're running the ball quite a bit in Atlanta, and Drake London, the rookie wide receiver, seems to kind of be the primary target at least 2 games in. That'll obviously shift a little bit, and it should return more to a middle ground where Kyle Pitts is probably more involved. But long story short, in Dynasty, the Pitts manager was a little bit panicked. He's kind of concerned, and that's where I pounced because Kyle Pitts is still a great talent. He's still so young, and coming out of college, he was this really highly sought after prospect. So I think long term, he will be an elite top end tight end for fantasy. Now I consider myself a competitive team, which we'll get into later. So it seems kind of weird for someone who's in a win now mode like my team to make this trade, because what I gave up for Kyle Pitts was George Kittle and a 1st round pick in next year's draft. You would think, oh well, if you're competing right now, you would need George Kittle on your roster, okay? Well, there's a couple components to this. One, I was also targeting Travis Kelce in a separate trade from a team that was kind of rebuilding. I ended up not getting Travis Kelce, but this trade was still accepted, and even when I saw I wasn't going to get Kelce, I just know that long-term, adding Kyle Pitts to the squad is something that I am going to be really glad I did. George Kittle will be better this year if he does get healthy and gets back on the field, but he has dealt with injuries the last few seasons, and he is 28 years old, so he's not an ancient player by any means. And like I said, this year, I would prefer him over Kyle Pitts, and he has insane upside in that offense, especially if Debo were to go down. With Trey Lance, we never saw Trey Lance and George Kittle play together this season. But now Jimmy Garoppolo is back in at quarterback, so I expect George Kittle to be that same elite tight end that he has been over the last few years. And I gave up that 1st round pick. Honestly, in a vacuum, I think I won this trade hands down in a Dynasty league just because of the years you get with Kyle Pitts. Even though this year it might not be great, I think eventually down the road he will be a top end tight end. So to kind of conclude this Kyle Pitts segment of the video, if there is a manager in your Dynasty league that is panicking about Kyle Pitts, I would strike now, try to buy low, because this is probably the lowest of lows that you will ever see for Kyle Pitts, okay? Moving on to this next trade, okay? And I'll go over how, kind of an overall view of how my team stacks up now after all these trades have been done. But I did make another trade. I bought Christian McCaffrey, running back for the Carolina Panthers, for Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver of the Denver Broncos, and a 2024 1st round pick. McCaffrey, when he's on the field, is arguably the best player in fantasy, especially in a league like this where it's half PPR and you get points for receptions. Although he hasn't necessarily, had the most catches this season compared to what he's used to. I think eventually that might improve a little bit. But the big question mark with McCaffrey the last couple seasons has been injury. And even through those injury-plagued seasons, In the 2022 drafts, for redraft at least, he was going, number 1, number 2 overall in a lot of drafts. All right. So long story short, in the next couple seasons, if he can stay healthy, which is a big if, he should be a top end running back 1 for my fantasy team, to add to my already very strong running back core. He is 26, so for a running back, in the next couple of seasons, you might see him start to fall off, especially a guy that's dealing with injury. Long story short, I don't want to get caught holding McCaffrey when that cliff happens. I am taking a risk, though, because if he suffers a season-ending injury this year, his trade value is going to plummet. But in Dynasty, I am playing to win. This is like the 4th or 5th year of the league. I think I've made it to 2 championships. I lost both of them. I need to get a trophy, so I'm going all in. If McCaffrey hits, he will be this is a league-winning type of trade for my team. And also another thing about trades like this is, let's say I get McCaffrey and he has a good season, right? And I lost my first and Jerry Jeudy. After this season, I can flip McCaffrey for probably about the equivalent of what I gave up. Maybe I could give him up for, a 2024 first and a 2025 first, something like that. It all depends on your league. Everyone values players differently. Everyone values rookie picks differently. But this isn't like, I permanently lost all these assets. Well, Judy's gone. But in terms of value, I could recoup some of this value unless, like I said, McCaffrey does have another injury situation, in which case I don't think anyone would want to touch McCaffrey. This is already, for what McCaffrey is, I think this is already a steal based on what he could be. The only reason I'm able to get McCaffrey on my team for a first and Jerry Jeudy is because of his injuries and because the team that I traded with is a rebuilding team. That's why he was looking to trade away McCaffrey and Travis Kelce, because he has a lot of pieces in place. But now, after trading McCaffrey for Jeudy and a first, and he traded Kelce for George Pickens and a first in 2023, you know what I'm saying? Like, he has 2 young wide receiver assets, which are very valuable in fantasy. If I'm rebuilding or if I'm in a startup, I like to build the Dynasty team largely off of young wide receivers, because their shelf life for fantasy value is just so long. And you see a lot of these young rookie wide receivers, even if they don't come out and have the most electric season, a lot of times their value still goes up over time. Even with Jerry Jeudy, he has flashed, but he hasn't been this. I drafted him at the end of the first round in a rookie draft. He hasn't been this alpha wide receiver 1, but his name still carries value, especially with Russell Wilson in Denver now, even though that's a whole nother story. Things aren't going the way we planned with that. But you kind of get what I'm saying. So this was kind of a win-win trade for both of us, I think. And then the team that I got Kyle Pitts from and traded George Kittle to, for whatever reason, they also traded for Travis Kelce. When I was in trade talks about making this trade with Warner 3, he was a little worried about his backup tight end just because Kittle is injury prone. So now he's got Kelce and George Kittle. You know what? That's about as good of a backup as you can get. Obviously, I think Kelce would probably be the starter. I don't know what he's going to do there. If he's going to flex one of them, I'm not sure. But his tight end position is definitely locked up, at least for this season. So now, to kind of conclude the video, taking a look at my roster now, I am 0-2. I did bench Tua for Tom Brady in week 2. Tua with his 6 touchdown passes against the Ravens. Tom Brady with like 1 kind of crazy touchdown against the Saints. I should have, you know what? I should have known Tom Brady always gets shut down by the Saints. But this is the roster right now as it stands, guys. And this is a 10-team league. I should have mentioned that at the beginning, half PPR. But I got Tua and Tom Brady at quarterback. I also have Trevor Lawrence still on the taxi squad. We'll see how things pan out with him. At running back, we got Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, arguably the top 2 running backs in fantasy when healthy, and Joe Mixon, who as my running back 3. How can you beat that? And then Miles Sanders, James Robinson, Darrell Williams if Connor is out, sort of in that running back 4, 5, 6 spot. McKissick in a half PPR does have some value. And then at wide receiver, we got Cortland Sutton, Mike Williams, DJ Moore, who I traded for in the offseason. We got Claypool, Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins, so when he comes back from suspension, he'll make the starting lineup. When Godwin's healthy, he'll make the starting lineup. And then at tight end, this is another thing I meant to mention. When I made this trade for Kyle Pitts, you might be thinking, if I'm in a win now mode, why would I trade for a tight end that I think is not going to be great this season while giving up a tight end that I think will be great for this season? Well, if you look at the rest of my tight end room, I do have Dallas Goedert and I do have Dalton Schultz. I don't think those guys possess the same upside as George Kittle when Kittle is healthy, but between those two, I think I can definitely get by at tight end. Dallas Goedert has had a nice little start to the season, 7.5 and 10.7 points at tight end and half PPR, which is fine. And then Dalton Schultz, week 1, I really like Dalton Schultz coming into the season. He had a nice little start to the year. Week 2, no Dak. He only got targeted 4 times. He caught 2 of them for 18 yards. I believe he lost a fumble as well. And with no Dak Prescott, and then he also ended that game with an injury, so he might miss some time. But long story short, between Goddard, Schultz, and Kyle Pitts, I think I have a start there. You know what I mean? Between those 3, at least one every week. And Kyle Pitts even this season, with how bad the start has been, he might trend up a little bit just because he's so talented. And I think if they have any sense, they'll try to get him the ball a little bit more, so he's at least somewhat relevant for fantasy, I hope. But yeah, this is the roster. Even though we're 0-2, I've been a competitive team every year pretty much. We've made 2 championships. We got no trophies to show for it, but this is our year. And yeah, and kind of to end off the video, one point I want to make is that all these assets I traded for, like McCaffrey and Kyle Pitts, let's just say I need to trade one of them after this season. I can. Once you acquire a player, they're not just locked on your team. I could go ahead and flip them later on. So even though I did lose a lot of young players and a lot of draft picks, we might be able to flip McCaffrey after the season for something else. And with running backs, I always like to kind of get out from under them earlier rather than a little bit too late. I'd rather be a year or two too early than 1 second too late, because once a running back falls off, it is over. So that was our little trade review video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.